Delphi Fire Station. Board members Dwayne Ward, Marshall Jura, Shane Evans, and Lean Aldrich were present. Doris McClellan was absent from the meeting. Also in attendance were Van Doolen, Will Schock, Debbie Lowe, Bill Connor, Darrell Sterrett, James Bishop, Melissa Darling, and Justin Darling. Dwayne Ward called the meeting to order at 5:30 p.m. Melissa Darling read the minutes from the June 24th, 2020 meeting. They were approved as read. Under old business, number 1, thermal imaging camera. Camera has been received and installed on 502. The department had training on the camera last month. Truck charger came in the day of the meeting and will be installed soon. Number 2, truck repairs. All trucks have been repaired. The air compressor has also been calibrated and certified. Number 3, under grass rig, no update. New business, budget proposal for 2021. Chief Doolan has sent the 2021 budget proposal to the board and give a PowerPoint presentation going over all changes. Under the 427 fund, 2 additional line items. Number 1121, firefighter run pay. This line item is being created to compensate firefighters based on participation. It will be based on a point system and will not have a predetermined amount of money per run. More calls and or more participation does not affect the amount of money spent in this line item. More calls and greater participation will reduce the dollar amount of each point. There will be 1 point per run, and the firefighter must attend at least 8 training sessions to be considered for this pay. The total number of points will be figured at the end of the year. There was a question about retiring members in mid-year and if they would be considered for pay at the end of the year. Chief Doolan told the board there would have to be a policy written regarding these kinds of situations. Payroll tax would also need to be figured out if this line item is created. The funds for this account came from reductions in various accounts. Account 1243, firefighting equipment / supplies. This fund's purpose is to be more specific in the budget for different equipment needs, nozzles, foam, etc., for annual service, testing fees, and for various equipment certifications. The funds to cover this line item came from miscellaneous and gear. Different bullet point, there were decreases in postage, fuel, oil, miscellaneous supplies, gear, schooling, consulting fees, travel expenses, building insurance, computer maintenance, vehicle maintenance, and building maintenance. Bullet point, the total budget for the 427 fund is $169,800, which is $5,350 over from 2020. 428 fund for capital outlays. Bullet point, line item 12 for 1431 and 1432 each have an increase of $6,000. Line item number 1444 will be decreased by $4,200 to a total of $40,000. The total budget for 428 fund is $52,000. This is an increase of $7,800 from 2020. Proposed 429 fund. This fund is proposed to be the 429 equipment fund and will be generated from funds collected from the billing of fire runs made by the department. The amount in this fund are separate from the regular budget. The funds in this budget will be rolled over year to year. According to Indiana state statute for fire department billing, these funds can only be used for emergency purchases of supplies or equipment. The department generates bills for vehicle wrecks, fire alarms, and fires. This bill is sent to collect funds that insurance companies have set aside for these kinds of claims. The fire department will not go after individuals and will collect only what the insurance company will pay. The board will not discuss the budget in depth until the August meeting. Mayor Shane Evans made a motion to table official recommendations of the 2021 budget and postpone the vote on the budget until the August meeting. Lean Aldrich, second, motion passed. New business number 2, phone and internet. Chief Doolan told the board that there is a possibility of the fire department using the new Delphi City internet and wireless network. He plans to leave the phone service in the budget for 2021. Number 3, escrow balance and payment. Chief Doolan asked Leanne Aldrich what this is for. He sees it listed in the mortgage statements. She is unsure of what this is and will check into it. Number 4, mortgage payoff. The chief asked the board why the department has not used the funds in the CD located at Security Federal to pay off the debt service for the building. The CD was created in order to obtain the mortgage from Security Federal as a security for the loan. The current mortgage balance is around $398,000. Dan is concerned about the interest that's being paid year after year. Leanne told the board that she believes the department should have a cash reserve. The funds would be hard to build back up. Number 5, grants. There are currently 3 different grants available that the chief would like to apply for. Number 1, 2020 Assistant to Firefighter FEMA grant. This is a matching grant. Number 2, 2021 Safer FEMA grant. This grant promotes participation in the fire service. This grant pays a salary for a fireman for 3 years, and during that time, the department must come up with a plan to fund that position in the budget. And the third, 2021 IDHS Foundation grant. This grant money comes from the money generated from the special firefighter license plate available from the B&B. This is a $4,000 grant. Mayor Shane Evans motion to adjourn the meeting. Leanne seconded. Meeting adjourned. Next meeting will be August 26th, 2020 at 5:30 p.m.
Any additions or corrections to the minutes? If I hear none, the minutes will stand as approved as read. Okay. Chief?
All right, to just use the minutes to touch base on some of those items for some updates. On the old business, under truck repairs, our engine 502 needed a new tank to pump valve. That should have been delivered to the repair technician today, and he'll be here on Friday to replace that. And then after that's replaced, you can schedule pump testing, which I'll schedule next week after we know that the truck probably wouldn't have passed pump testing with that bad valve, just because it wouldn't be able to get it back in that week. So that's set for Friday. Updates on the grass rig.
James Bishop and I are going down the 17th of September to do final inspection. If all is well, it should follow us home on the 18th.
The question is, are you guys just driving it back?
It's supposed to be delivered to come back.
Okay. I just didn't know if they were driving it or if it was being trailered. I didn't know how the mud tires you do on the highway for.
We'll find out. It has, well, new apparatus has to be delivered under its own power. This is not new apparatus, this is a refurbished repair. We'll find out.
Again, where's it at there off again?
What's that?
Where is the truck?
It will be in Arnold, Missouri by the time we go
I was
down,
thinking
because,
somewhere south, but I couldn't
Yeah.
remember what. Okay, thank you.
Guess we'll probably get to the budget stuff here in a little bit. So skipping past the budget to go on to the new business from last month. The number 3, the escrow balance, I was told was money that wasn't used for the initial building build, and then it was put in that escrow for things that would need to be or expected to be done. Did I understand that right?
We closed on this building before the building was done. And you had a certain amount, a dollar amount of draws that you were allowed. It was set in stone. At that point, when we closed, there was that 14,000 that was unused. So that laid in an escrow because there was possible other expenses that would have come out of it. It did not, so that 14,000 by vote could be taken and applied to the loan balance.
Would that be the only option? Would we be able to, like, if we wanted to do the radio tower project out of that money?
No, I don't see how you justify that. That was part of your mortgage, it's an escrow for your mortgage. You're wanting to move it then to another line item, correct?
I mean, I think the radio tower was part of the original plan I have for the building, is what I was under the impression of.
The radio tower was somewhat of a wish list part of the building, sacrificial lamb, if you will, along with the hydraulic heat in the floors and whatnot. The tower was never spec'd out with the cost of this building. It was just kind of, here's the wish list. Well, in reality, you have to cut those things down, and that was one sacrificial lamb. It was never spec'd with or designed with the construction of the building.
And that would be the same for the generator then too?
What's that?
That would be the same for the generator as well?
Right. Yes, the generator also was, if you will, a sacrificial lamb that didn't happen. And the only spec, if you will, was just a verbal from Shepler, the electrician. And that was as quick as to say as well, it'd be $50,000 per generator. There was nothing there for formal done.
Okay. So then the only option really is the electrician. I attended the county fire chiefs meeting last week, and, all the chiefs and departments over there approved the auto mutual aid map. This has been kind of in the works for years, I think that's safe to say. And it was kind of dependent on the capabilities of the computer-aided dispatch, at the sheriff's department. So if a department wanted to set up lines of who would be the first person or first department paged if we had a house fire, it was kind of dependent on the limitations of that system. So in 2020, what we did with our technology is we had colored pencils and a large county map with roads on it, and we colored in what department would cover our area. So if we have a house fire in Delphi Fire Department would get paged, and then depending on the location, Camden Fire Department would get paged at the same time. You wouldn't have to wait for someone to get on the radio and see smoke and then say, hey, you better send somebody else. So if there's a structure fire of any kind or a fire alarm and perhaps an entrapment type accident or crash, another department also gets paged. So you get extra manpower and apparatus with no delay. So we have a map of the area for Delphi that includes Rockfield Fire, Camden Fire, Flora Fire, Buck Creek, Cutler, Battleground, Brookston, and Monticello. So I have to contact the out-of-county departments to make sure they're on board with our plan here, that they would agree to respond to these areas with us during our initial page, but all of the Carroll County departments are on board with the areas that we've asked them to cover for us, and we're on board with the areas that they've asked us to cover for them. So it's really only structure fires and building type fire alarms where there could be a fire. So we asked the dispatch coordinator when we could expect that to start, and she said she was taking it to their CAD, their mapping company this week, and however long it took them to input the boundary coordinates for each department. So that should be something new.
So you're saying, according to the area, wherever the coal's at, whichever area it's in, the other department will get the call, is that correct?
Right. We would get the call, and so our pagers would go off, and their pagers would go off before anything was even mentioned on the
So
radio.
if it's north, it'd be somebody that away, and
Yeah, so I pretty much did closest, to the fire station, and then also a little bit of, apparatus available, or, personnel available, and, try to do, whoever was closest that could get here, soonest to back us up on any type of fire we had in that area. On Saturday, 4 of us attended green bin rescue training. So the Carroll FFA has taken on this big project of providing funding to get equipment for every fire department in the county. Also, the fire departments like Burnsville or Idaville that aren't in the county but have county coverage, grain bin rescue equipment. So if someone falls into a grain bin and the auger is on, the grain starts surrounding them, and then eventually the pressure doesn't allow them to breathe. So we got these grain rescue tubes that we would put over, they're hard plastic, and put it over the victim and work it down into corn. And then we also have, they purchased a rescue auger, which is like you would see at an elevator, like a large auger, except it's 5 feet tall, and it's powered by a cordless drill. And you stick it down inside that tube, and it starts removing all the corn to the outside of that plastic ring that we put around them. So they provided our department and every other department in the county with those devices, and we were able to bring that home with us on Saturday. So that's a heck of a lot of money that the Carroll FFA put into this project to support this. They had a presentation, and there are really a lot more grain bin accidents or mishaps than people really know about. Several are fatal. Those are usually the ones you hear about, but there's a lot that are near fatal that you don't hear about. And until now, only 2 other agencies in the department had that type of rescue equipment to perform those rescues. So I was thankful for the efforts of the FFA over there. And then aside from any budget stuff, that's really all I have for today.
Okay. Leanne?
Joanne, I don't know whether this was Shane's idea or your idea to create a 429 fund. And that's for your insurance reports and the individuals end up paying. You cannot use a 429 number. I spoke with our financial advisors. If it's a capital account that you're wanting to establish, you have to use the first available 400 number. But if it is like supplies and miscellaneous equipment and stuff, you have to use the first available 200 number. It's not capital expenses. It would make it much easier, common sense says, because you've got a 427 and a 428, so it would be nice to have a 429, but you can't just assign that to 429.
Right.
So with what you're saying that you're allowed to spend out of those reimbursements from people, or emergency supplies and towards equipment, miscellaneous equipment, that would not be a 420, that would not be a 400 number, would not be capital expense.
Right.
And the money you're generating would never pay for a capital expense anyway. It could pay towards a capital expense, but the money you're generating would never pay for what your capital plan items are.
Yeah, that's what, in my proposal, in the, like in the PowerPoint, I mean, that's why I put quotations like 429. We had a 427 or 428, that's why I just said, this is some, I would guess that the fund number must already exist because there's money going into it currently, right?
Sure.
I just didn't know what that number was.
It's gotta be all added up and transferred to the correct funds once it's established, if that's what you want it to be done. But I think you have to set that fund up by a resolution or ordinance. I don't know which it would be. You can't just tell me tonight to set up a fund. That's something that has to be voted on and approved, and I don't know if it has to be a resolution or an ordinance.
Yeah, so,
I would
like I said,
assume a resolution can set up a fund,
yeah,
but
it was never my intent to name it the 429 fund. I didn't know what else to name it. And so what is the money in currently?
It's just in your 428 fund right now, or your 427 fund right now.
Okay.
So it'll be transferred out of that.
Okay. Yeah, what, I don't know what the process is,
So
but,
you need to propose the resolution to establish a 200, and what would the next day, the 200 line item?
See, I'm not your legal person, but here I am, I'm saying to you, I don't know if the resolution takes care of it,
Well, whatever.
or an ordinance, I don't know which.
so does it not coincide with the billing ordinance that the city had, or the department has in place? Like we have an ordinance that says we are allowed to bill, and then it mentions the elements of the state statute that allows us to bill a certain amount and what that fund is to be used for and how you can spend out of it. So,
Doesn't name a fund though.
I don't care.
So you're going by state codes to allow yourself to bill people money.
No, we have a ordinance, a billing ordinance, that's what I'm asking you. If that, you're saying we either need a resolution or an ordinance or something, and I'm asking, we already have an ordinance on the books that allow for us to bill and specify what we're allowed to use the money for. Would it be in addition to that ordinance that already describes all those other activities?
Now setting up the fund, okay, it would be a separate ordinance or resolution.
But we're not sure which one. Yeah, I don't know what I'm gonna ask for.
I would think it has to be an ordinance. You're setting up the fund, you're changing the financial structure. But all the previous ordinance does is allow them to bill private individuals for what insurance doesn't pay. That's all that does by state code, but it does not set up a separate fund number or what it's for.
The billing statement, billing resolution.
Well, the whole thing we signed together, we have a copy of that, and it's going to have to sign that, or
I'm gonna look for that real quick. Let me go see if I can find it.
I think it's a
There's a
resolution.
resolution, that's what's attached with the bill that goes out.
The city does all this, you do it.
I'll back up just a minute. I got wrapped up in what was done ahead of time. I want to introduce the mayor, Anita Worley. Hold your hand up, girl. I've known her for a good while, but then I wasn't thinking about it. I know some of the rest of you probably don't know her, but then that's beside the point, so. Anyhow, when Dan gets back, then we'll go from there.
Yeah. Really grand, but one kid's it. I think to be safe for now, since, yep, I think, yeah, since you're the provider unit, that makes us safe.
So this isn't not the signed one, but we have a signed one, I think this is the first one I've done. So, I have resolution number 13-1, establishing the Delphi Tri-Township Fire Protection Territory Equipment Fund.
It's establishing your 428.
And then I have ordinance number 88-6. It says ordinance establishing Delphi Tri-Township Equipment Fund.
See, each township and city had to write, the city did an ordinance and all the townships did a resolution to do the same thing.
Right. Yeah, so
So we,
it says all the monies received by the township fire department shall be placed in one fund under the supervision of the clerk treasurer, which fund shall be the Delphi Tri-Township Equipment Fund.
That's your 428 fund, that's your original, setting up your original 428 fund. You set up a 427 general operating and a 428 repackaging. So that's your original fund that was set up.
And this resolution, 13-1, has to do with, it also says the Fire Protection Territory Equipment Fund. But this one says, section 2, that any fees charged pursuant to this authority must be in writing, itemized, specific services rendered, include a copy of the fire incident report. Billing must take place within 30 days, must contain verification that the bill has been approved by the chief. So this specifically talks about fire department billing when it mentions the establishment of the Fire Territory Equipment Fund.
And that's a resolution.
That's right.
And does it mention a township on there?
So there's a place on the back for 3 townships in the city of Delphi sign.
Okay.
And then your signature, which should, if there's an original.
So that means that your 3 townships have to go back to your board. You have to get approval from your boards in order to enter into it. Then you can create. So you set up a billing process. A billing process. You have not set up a specific fund for it.
Okay. I'm just, so the only reason I ask is because the title of it was Resolution Establishing the Delphi Tri-Township Fire Protection Territory Equipment Fund. So this title specifically says establishing the fund. That's where I just didn't know how.
I would need to read both of those, but when you go back to the Fire Territory Equipment Fund, that is your 428 fund. You have a 427 for general operating, you have a 428 for equipment fund.
So the money right now from building going into the 428.
If it's going
Because of that.
Because that was established as the 428 fund, and the billing was established under that fund. So all the billing now is
Stay
going
there.
to 428.
So can't it just stay there? Because of that resolution right there?
That resolution does not tell me, does it, that you're taking the amount that you're billing individual customers?
It says any money that is collected under this section shall be deposited in one fund under the supervision of the clerk treasurer of the city of Delphi, which fund shall be the Delphi Tri-Township Fire Protection Territory Equipment Fund. It shall be used to pay principal and interest on a loan made by the Department of Homeland Security or a division of the department for a purchase of new or used firefighting and other emergency equipment or apparatus, or used for the purchase of equipment, buildings, property, fire protection, or emergency services.
And that's a contradiction of what you just read to me a little bit ago, that what you could take your billing for.
Isn't
Because
that
a
what
little
the
bit ago, you said you wanted a 428 for fire resources, and that the only thing code allowed you to spend it on was emergency supplies and equipment. So that's a contradiction of what you're reading right there.
Didn't you just read something about where that billing money goes?
Uh-huh. Yeah, it says it should be, when we receive it.
Yeah, like read that again where it talks about when you get the, when you bill them and then
Yep.
where it goes.
Any money that is collected under this section shall be deposited in one fund under the supervision of the clerk treasurer of the city of Delphi, which fund shall be the Delphi Tri-Township Fire Protection Territory Equipment Fund. It should be used to pay principal and interest on a loan made by the Department of Homeland Security or division of the department for the purchase of new or used firefighting and other emergency equipment or apparatus, used for the purchase of equipment, buildings, and property for firefighting or fire protection or other emergency services. Is that what you meant?
Well, I thought you said something about the money that came from a bill. In one of those papers that you have, just have, I don't know.
I can make copies of it for everybody if they.
I think what you better do tonight is table it. Your money is going into an account right now. When we find out the correct way to do it, we can transfer the money. That is not an issue. It's a legal operation. But at this point, we're not clear. So I think our attorney needs to advise us, because just a minute ago, when you were discussing your 429 fund, you said it was for emergency supplies and equipment. That's not what you're describing in this ordinance, so it's almost, it's a contradiction of itself.
No, so that must have been what Melissa read on the minutes. It said the fire department, so according to the statute, the fire department building use funds can only be used for emergency purchases of the supplies or equipment. So the statute allows for you to make one purchase a year. Like if you were to save the money up and make a large purchase for a new truck, you could save that money from however long and purchase the truck. Otherwise, aside from that one purchase a year, you're only allowed to buy emergency supplies. So we use 4 buckets of foam at a fire. We could use that fund to replace the 4 buckets of foam. We can't use it for a scheduled purchase other than one time a year by the state statute that allows you to bill as a fire department. So aside from that one purchase a year, that fund would only be used for emergency supplies, like replenishing or something broke, the nozzle broke and we need to replace it, and it's $500. We could take it out of that as opposed to what our normal operating expenses are, because that wasn't something that we planned on replacing that year.
I'm gonna make a motion that we table creating this fund or going any farther with it or making any transfers until we discuss it with Baker Tilly, the financial advisor, and our attorney. And do a clarification on the ordinance or resolution that's already passed and what we need to do for insurance billing. Insurance billing is a separate animal. So until you have legal advice on what's already on the books and if that applies, I think we need to table it, and that's my motion.
So we got a motion before us, and I think she very well explained what it was. Do I have a second?
I second it.
All right, any question on the motion? All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same. Motion carried.
So
You done?
is she researching it, or am I researching, like who's researching it?
I am. For the provider units, so I'll do it.
You'll do it, you say?
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. All right, you got more?
Oh, no, I don't know.
You're done? Okay. Any other things need to be brought up tonight? We need to, you say we need to take these all back to our board as far as the budget? Is that
Or you
correct?
never present it to the city. Yes. Your board, your advisory board has to approve.
Yeah, that's what
They
I
have to
thought.
give you the okay to it.
We have to get it signed by them first before we go back to the city, correct?
That is correct.
Do you have a,
Pardon?
do you have a sure thing of what they will ask you for?
I don't know. Can we come up with something for them to, Leanne,
Do what? What are you saying?
as far as
I was writing.
well, that's fine. What Marcia's asking, I mean, budget-wise and so forth, for our board to look at.
Dan submitted you I didn't bring mine tonight.
Well, I didn't,
I mean, is that, I mean, is that?
I know, I hit
Still what
mine.
you want? I thought you were just kind of,
Well,
No, that's what,
I thought.
what you handed out last time, correct?
yeah, that's what I was asking
I mean,
for.
Doris has got it there in front of her. I think that's the one I give her.
Yes, it
I
was.
done me, I didn't make a copy before I give it to you, but that's no problem, I'll get it.
I don't think I don't need to support it, just spend down there appropriation.
Anything?
It's an increase, I think they stayed at 154 to 158 in general.
I got it,
Moving
I got
up to
it.
169.
I thought there was some
Revenue's
things
never
on
that
it
high.
that were sure thing.
That could be, is there some things on there, Marcia's asking, is there some things on the budget that,
I'm sorry. I didn't hear what the question was, that's all.
Is there things on the budget that were, is that for sure what you were wanting, or was there items on there that you were just wondering about that you didn't really say?
No,
That's
That's,
that.
that's what I'm asking for. the, different the extra line items that are, not all, like, what I took out of miscellaneous to put in the line item that was annual maintenance was mainly only to identify what those funds would go for more than just being under miscellaneous. So reduce the miscellaneous amount, put them in a dedicated fund that says annual maintenance. Every year we spend $7,000 on hose testing, air pack testing, you know, it would come out of that line item as opposed to miscellaneous. So the other line item for firefighter run pay is what I'm asking for, and then if that's not what the board agrees to, then that's not what the board agrees to, but what I put in the budget is what I'm asking for. And if there was input from the board, like at last meeting, or that you guys came up with between now and today, then I would try to answer those questions, but that's what I was asking for.
And I haven't looked back at it, so I said to get it to yours, I didn't make a copy for myself, before I did, and, I wasn't thinking.
Yes.
Is there any discussion here on this while we're talking about it, please, before we go back to our board?
So, I would say just so everybody knows, on the increase on both funds were based upon the last, 4 years worth of income for each fund, based on the taxes generated, which was provided to me by, Shane. He said, here's how much the department brought in taxes for each fund over the last several years, and then, you know, obviously we might anticipate a decrease in funding next year just because of the year that we've had. But, my request for both funds was under the proposed, or I'm sorry, the income from the last 4 years based on the, figures that Shane provided me.
I think at the city, we provided, as we were doing our budget, we estimated at about 85% of what we've seen in that prior year average. So I don't know if you took your estimate of revenue down to that number, or are you projecting what it was?
No,
most recent
we
year?
projected, what it was, and it's over the course of the last several years of average, and know that it's higher this time than what we would probably bring in. The discussion that we had was that we had, savings, like, to cover the 20% lower this year based on that. And then, you know, obviously everybody would assume that we would recover from that at some point, but it would still not use much out of the savings in comparison. I think that the increase was $5,000 over last year's budget, so it was not using much of the savings for the new budget.
Total 5, say, over.
So,
That's in the general operating.
5,350 or something?
sorry, my glasses fogged up, I can't see.
Look too bad.
So it was $5,350 higher than last year's budget under the operating 427 budget.
What do you have for estimated revenue, Dan?
So for let's see if it lines up right, 2017, I have 189,000. For 2018, I have 180,000. For back that up a year. So 2016, 189,000. 2017, 180,000. 2018, 172,000. And 2019, 197,000. So on the third page, if you have what I have in the orange. So in the orange,
Your estimated revenue for next year is 148,000 with your tax and everything.
this is what I was given for the,
That's like
what our budget was and what we actually brought in there.
for these years, which is over that, so, I asked for $5,350, knowing that our revenue would be slightly down this year, but,
So you're counting on the reserves that you.
yeah, but like, just the year prior, we had over $25,000 more brought in by taxes and all this stuff, so we're even with that.
Then how do you pay for the capital improvement? How do you pay for ladder truck, just got to.
So I think we're talking about the operating budget.
Where's that at, Dan?
Just to use that as
Alright.
operating fund.
Where's your
It's fine in
estimated?
there. Don't have all of these revenue on those.
Right, you just got the, you've got the spending.
And remember back in the way, when they predicted our revenues would drop in the following 2 years. Not so much as the year when the law would allow that, so those are the things so we did see that as we go through that.
Our financial advisors, warned us that we will see a drop in revenue. And where Shane did his estimate and did it with all the reductions, I think they took a, 10% and Shane used a 15% maybe, or maybe it's reversed. But your estimated revenue for next year for your budget's $148,000. So, you have reserve funds, and that's okay, but Baker Tilly is also advising you that next year is not gonna be the worst that you're gonna get hit financially. That actually 22 and 23 will be your hardest years. It's all falling back to the coronavirus, and it depends on how long this is gonna last, depending with these cutbacks in revenue, with how long the pandemic lasts. But your revenue is going to go down, and next year, even though Shane is being prudent and estimating your revenue is gonna be 148,000, you're asking for 169. So you're asking to go into your reserve funds and take reserve money to pay for your wish list, which is okay if you didn't have a large capital improvement plan. But I think at one time I was told that sooner or later you're going, correct me if I'm wrong, you're gonna need a ladder truck. That we are the only ladder truck that is certified in the county. But that's not a cheap purchase. That's gonna be more than our building was. So spending down your appropriations is fine when you have it and you have a specific need that generates that. But with the idea that you have a capital improvement plan coming up, that you can't tell me how you're gonna pay for it if you start spending down. Obviously, you're gonna have to borrow money, or you're gonna have to bond, or you're gonna have to raise taxes. And no one wants to raise taxes.
Also have to have personnel to operate that truck, so if we can't do something to incentivize people to show up, then it doesn't mean it's gonna get back the truck, and that's all the things that you just tried to do, just try to incentivize people to be on the department and show up for us, so. It's, you know, we're in a spot where, yes, we need to plan for the capital for the new truck, but if we don't have the personnel to show up, then we're in a hard spot too, so.
One of the things that, is discussed in the last month's meeting about funding is out of that 427 budget, where I'm asking for the extra $5,350, we pay $40,000 for mortgage payment, and then $12,000 extra a year of that is interest, okay? And we have a CD to cover that entire mortgage. If we paid it off, that's $40,000 a year that's not being spent out of our 427, that could be incorporated back into what I'm asking for fire run pay, and still cover the loss of that budget by $20,000, and still add to the savings for the ladder truck in however many years. I'm saying that we're spending $40,000 a year out of the same budget that we're all talking about here, when we could cover that fund by using the CD and paying that off, and then not have to pay $13,000, $12,000, whatever it is a year in interest.